Alright, so lesson 2 is getting to the good stuff, and this is where we're now going to start writing our first bit of code. So when we're using a console application, we're going to use this the keyword console, and we push a full stop. And the console is a little black window which allows us to read and write things from a window. It's a black window, it doesn't look very flash, but for the purpose of learning programming for the first time, it's a really good place to start. So one of the key lines that we're always going to use, and you'll get very familiar with this, is something called console.writeLine. So if we want to print something onto our screen, we use console.writeLine in order to do this. So it's pretty customary when we go to learn a new language to use Hello World. And Hello World basically just shows that the program's been installed correctly and that you can get something printed to the page. Alright, so as I hinted at last time, when you want to check the program to see how it works, we click on Start Debugging. You can either push the F5 key on your keyboard or the little window, the little play button up across the top here. So I'll push F5 and then the program runs, and you might notice a little black window that appeared very, very quickly. It was so quick that your eyes couldn't quite see them. So in order for us to give a little appearance of slowing things down, we run in conjunction with the console.writeLine another line called console.readLine, and this allows the user to read what has been written in the line above. Sometimes, however, you just want to basically print something very, very quickly to the page, and this is where WriteLine would come into place. Okay, so console.writeLine, console.readLine. We're going to click on the play button now. This is the first bit of code that you've written, and you'll notice now we've got our console window, which is all up in black, and we've got some greyish kind of white writing, Hello World, appearing. Okay, so there's our very first program being written. To quit out of the program, you've got a few choices now. You can either click on the red X, you can click on the stop button, or you can push enter. By pushing enter, that will basically step through the next part of the code, which is going to be giving the focus back to this window here. In this case, because it's done all of its jobs, hits the end sub and will finish. So whenever we write the code, we're going to stick it between sub main and end sub, just for when we're starting off with learning programming. Okay, so the next thing that we probably want to do now is to start thinking about putting a bit more information in there. So you might notice at the moment that the Hello World has got some quotation marks around it. The quotation marks indicate the fact that our Hello World is something called a string. A string is a combination of characters on our keyboard. It can include numbers, but they're not really treated like numbers as such. So whenever you see things with inside quotes, that is called a string. Okay, so it's a bunch of characters that are stored in the computer's memory, not as text, not as numbers, but as characters on our keyboard. Okay, so if we were to type in Hello World again, and say we're wanting to actually design a little program that is going to ask the person for its name, and then put in a little hello message, we're going to have to try and introduce a concept called variables. So variables are things that can change. Just like in maths, you often use X, Y, and Z for variables. In programming, we use variables a lot to remember things that are going to be changing while the program's up and running. So the way that you're going to work with the variable is you use a keyword called dim. This stands for dimension, and this is where you're going to tell the program to expect some information to be plugged in. It reserves a space in the computer's memory, and depending on the type of variable that it's going to be will depend on how much space it allocates. So the first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to ask for the person's first name to be plugged in. One of the things I'm going to do here is something called camel case notation, and that makes my variable name stand out a wee bit more. And you do that by, if you've got a double-barreled name like this, is to capitalize the second word's starting letter. Okay, so you can see now that we've got the first name, and the name really stands out because of the fact that we've got this capital here. At the moment it's saying that we've got this green underlined, and it's popping up this little error message which says unused local variable. That's because I haven't used it through the rest of my code yet. And lastly, when I push the space button, you might notice it comes up with as. This is because it wants to know what kind of variable do you think this is going to store. Is it going to have some letters, or is it going to have some numbers next to it? And this refers to the different types of variables or data types that we can use within programming. So as mentioned before, we're going to use something called a string. This is going to remember a combination of characters. So what we're going to do here is we can type whatever we want inside of these open and closing speech marks, as this is just a message which is written to this screen. I'm going to ask a question of what is your name, and then what we'd like to do is we'd like to remember this person's name that gets plugged in. Now remember, if I do it or you do it, we'll end up with a different name, isn't it? So we need something that's going to remember what is typed in. Now some people, what they go through and do is they just want to go through and think that this line of code here is going to do all the magic for them. What we need to do is something called assignment. An assignment is whereby we're going to go through and make this variable, which we've declared up the top here, equal to whatever is typed into the console. So this line of code is going to read or remember whatever they've typed in to this window when it pops up. So in this case, it's going to read what they've typed into the console, and then it's going to stuff it into the left hand side of the equal symbol. In this case, the variable called first name. So the equal symbol is called assignment. This is where we're going to make the left hand side of the equation equal the right hand side of the equation. So when we go and run this now, it will ask us, hello, what is your name? I'll type in my name here. You'll notice that I'm not a very good touch typer. That's one of my things I need to work on. Push on enter, and that's the program running. You might think that's not very spectacular, but what's just happened there is it's gone through, asked this question, and then it's stored the results of the answer in this variable called first name. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to copy and paste this line of code here, or you can get into the habit of writing it again, and we're going to output the person's name. So in this case, I'm just going to type in first name. Notice how there is no quotation marks around first name, and that is because it is not a string, it is a variable that is being printed to the page. The variable does contain a string, but in this case, if I was to put quotes around it, it would actually simply print to my page first name, and not what I'm after. So let me just show you how this could work if I haven't done this correctly. Okay, so type in Mr. Devitt. Again, I need to have the console.read line so you can actually take a little pause to see what's happening with the program. So run things here. Here is the program where we're going to ask person's name. Got first name popping up. That's because of this. In order to make it work correctly, we need to remove the quotes. Okay, at the moment I'm trying to type onto my keys, but I can't, and that is because the window is still working. I need to stop the program by either using one of those methods that I mentioned before. So either by pushing the enter key, the close key, or the stop key. Okay, so if you're thinking, why can't I print or type into the page anymore? This is one of the reasons why. Okay, so in order to make this work correctly, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the quotes, and you'll notice that it changes from this kind of reddish color into black writing. This means that I'm now going to be writing the variable which is remembering what I've actually typed in previously. Okay, so what we're going to do now is when we type in your name, all it does is it reads that information in and prints it back to the screen. It looks a little bit confusing when it's done straight after that. To make this a little bit more interesting, we're now going to do something called concatenation. This is where we join strings together. We're going to build up a sentence which is going to use the contents of this variable first name. So the way that we do that is we mention the word hello, and then we want to try and tack on the person's name in this. The problem that we have if we just try and do that is it's trying to say that it's expecting something to happen. That's because when we want to add two things together like this, or concatenation, we need to use a special symbol called the AND or ampersand symbol. We call this the ampersand symbol. This ampersand symbol tells us Visual Basic that we'd like to join a couple of things together. Okay, so in this case it's going to join the person's first name that was typed in previously to the string of hello. When we run this now, you'll notice that when we type in my name, and then it will say basically hello Devitt, like I've just mentioned. In order to get the space between there and there, I've done a space. I've hard-coded a space in there to get the gap. If I didn't have that, those two words would run together and it wouldn't have the space there. Okay, so that is working with your very first variables. This is working with the console, and this is also working with reading information in and assigning the information to this variable, and then finally we're doing string concatenation. Okay, that brings the second tutorial to a close.